Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ, and a most warm welcome to all of you who are joining us for this live broadcast coming to you from Bahrain, where Pope Francis will be taking part in the closing of the Forum for Dialogue East and West for Human Coexistence. This event is taking place at Al Fida Square of the Sakhir Royal Palace in Bahrain. From wherever you're joining us today, tonight, or this evening, perhaps in the morning, I'd like to welcome you to this live broadcast. Many of you we know join us through our own various Vatican Media channels. So if you're joining us through the Vatican News app or the Vatican Radio app, our Vatican News web portal, our Vatican News English YouTube channel, or our Facebook Live feed, a most warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for tuning in. We have those of you joining us through our media partners, tuning in through television, Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network at Madarshan TV, Shalom World Television Networks USA, EWTN, Salt and Light Media, Shalom TV India, Sunday Shalom. And we have some radio listeners out there, including those of you tuning in through Luminous Radio. Some of you tuning in through our shortwave transmission, and others tuning in through other diocesan and local radio channels. Some of you also picking up the broadcast through other internet platforms, however you're joining us today. A most warm welcome. I'm Sister Bernadette, and it is truly a pleasure to be able to provide you with the translation in English of what's going to be happening today. This is Pope Francis' first full day here in Bahrain. He arrived yesterday at Sakhir Air Base in Awali around 4:45 p.m. local time. He was then officially welcomed at the air base, and then he paid the customary courtesy visit to the King of Bahrain and met with authorities, members of civil society, and the diplomatic corps, and addressed them with a speech yesterday using the image of the Tree of Life as the basis for that discourse. We've seen a motorcade approaching. Again, we're on the grounds of Sakhir Royal Palace in Bahrain, and this is the closing of a 2-day forum that's been taking place. We now see the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar. I believe that he has his back toward us. And of course, they are now waiting to greet the Holy Father. Present at this ceremony will be His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, the King of the Kingdom of Bahrain. And we just saw, most likely he was greeting His Eminence Dr. Ahmed Al Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, a university in Egypt, who is also the chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders, with whom our Holy Father will meet later in the day. This is Pope Francis's 39th apostolic journey since becoming Pope. The last apostolic journey Pope Francis undertook was to Kazakhstan from the 13th to the 15th of November. Here we see his motorcade coming along the way. The street lined with banners of the flag of the Kingdom of Bahrain and the papal flag. And we see now the papal motorcade flanked with security on horseback, now surrounding his car as he makes his final path down the paved road here toward the square. The last journey that our Holy Father undertook to Kazakhstan, very similar to the reason for his journey here to Bahrain. He participated in Kazakhstan at another international meeting, the 7th Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions in Sur-Sultan. And at the conclusion of that meeting, interreligious leaders from around the world adopted a declaration expressing a common desire to work towards a better world while condemning violence in the name of religion. The Bahrain Forum for Dialogue, East and West for Human Coexistence, which our Holy Father will now be taking part in the conclusion. Talks were given yesterday. It's being attended by religious leaders and prominent personalities from about 60 countries around the world and was organized by the Muslim Council of Elders, the Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, and the King Hamad Global Center for Peaceful Coexistence. So the aim of the conference is building bridges of dialogue, and the various sessions in the forum's program have focused on promoting coexistence, global and human brotherhood. They've been looking at the role of religious leaders and scholars in addressing the challenges of the times. They've been looking at interreligious dialogue and achieving world peace. This particular apostolic journey was announced by the Holy See Press Office at the end of September, the 28th of September. And at that time, a statement was released saying that Pope Francis accepted the invitation of both civil and ecclesial authorities and announced the visit would take place between the 3rd to the 6th of November. And he would visit the cities of Manama, which is the capital of Bahrain, and Awali, specifically for the purpose of this particular Bahrain Forum for Dialogue, East and West, for human coexistence. At the end of last year, the first cathedral in Bahrain was inaugurated and consecrated to Our Lady of Arabia. Here we see now a close-up of the Holy Father's car as it arrives now. He will be greeted.
Baba Francis, Baba al-Vatican. His Holiness Pope Francis of the Vatican.
We've heard his arrival announced. In case you're wondering where exactly we are, we're in Bahrain, just to the east of Saudi Arabia and just to the north of Qatar and the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. It's situated on the Persian Gulf, made up of about 50 natural islands and 33 artificial islands. It's about 760 square miles. It's one of the smallest Asian nations, the third smallest in Asia. Our Holy Father now greeting His Majesty, the King of Bahrain, and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, as we know, was one of the co-signers of the document on human fraternity and peaceful living together, which was signed during Pope Francis' first ever visit to an Arab nation in February of 2019, and since then has taken place in several other meetings of this nature in order to promote dialogue and civil coexistence with our Muslim brothers and sisters. Our Holy Father flanked now in his wheelchair by His Majesty and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, who is also chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders, which is one of the groups who has organized this particular meeting. And we now see helicopters with both of the flags of the Kingdom of Bahrain and the papal flag extended. Catholics who live here in Bahrain belong to the Apostolic Vicariate of North Arabia and are led by the Apostolic Victor Bishop Paul Hinder, a prelate originally from Switzerland. And so they join other Catholics from various other areas in Arabia. Many of the Christians who are present here in Bahrain, mainly from the Philippines and India. Now we see our Holy Father giving water to a garden here in the square. It's a Tree of Peace ceremony. Now being accompanied once again in his wheelchair. One other cathedral present in the Apostolic Vicariate is Holy Family Cathedral in Kuwait City, the capital of Kuwait. Other countries that participate in this particular Apostolic Vicariate, other than Bahrain, are Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia, although there are no churches in Saudi Arabia per se. It was originally established as the Apostolic Prefecture of Kuwait in 1929. Then it became the Apostolic Vicariate of Kuwait in 1954. And in 2011 it was renamed the Apostolic Vicariate of Northern Arabia. In 2011, Pope Benedict XVI, through the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of Sacraments, declared the Blessed Virgin Mary under the title of Our Lady of Arabia as patroness of the Northern Vicariate. And our Holy Father will be going to the cathedral, newly consecrated, as we said last year. At the time of the consecration, Cardinal Tagley, who represented the Pope, also presented a letter from Pope Francis to the King of Bahrain, who at that time was still looking forward to hosting the Holy Father. And here we see his dream come true. Our Holy Father now seated along with His Majesty, the King of Bahrain, and the Grand Imam of Awali. Here we say Cardinal Ayuso, who is the prefect of the Dicastery for Interreligious Dialogue, who has been closely following all of this process with our Muslim brothers and sisters as we strive toward obtaining together what is being termed a human fraternity. And now we go to the program.
King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of the Kingdom of Bahrain. Your Holiness, Pope Francis of the Vatican. Your Eminence, Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and Chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders. Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, a very good morning and welcome to this prestigious gathering. The speech of His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of the Kingdom of Bahrain.
As we heard, we will now hear a speech of the King of Bahrain.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah was-salatu was-salam ala Rasulillah Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een.
In the name of the clement and merciful God, God be thanked, blessings and peace be upon God's Prophet Muhammad, His Holiness Pope Francis, His Eminence Grand Imam Professor Ahmed Al-Tayyib, Sheikh of Al-Azhar, Eminences and wise religious representatives, dear people present. God's peace and blessings be with you. It is a matter of pride for us to once again welcome His Holiness Pope Francis and His Eminence the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Professor Ahmed Al-Tayyib, who have worked hard to enrich this forum and the success of this honorable visit. To them we are grateful and thankful for what they have done, and we ask the patron God to help them in carrying out their great missions and making them pleasing in His eyes. We also extend our cordial welcome to our distinguished guests and take pleasure in meeting you on this blessed day on the occasion of the Bahrain Dialogue Forum for Humanity, a day we consider memorable and a relevant event whose goals coincide with our country's aspirations for humanity and its progress. May every human being enjoy a dignified and peaceful life in a more stable and safer world. We would like to express to all our willingness and interest to promote this important world meeting, convinced of the influential role of religious leaders, thinkers, and experts in addressing, for greater peace and stability, the various challenges and crises that our societies face. We rejoice at the end of this blessed meeting to congratulate you on its success with the presence and participation of this elite of sages from the East and the West, who have dedicated themselves to the service of humanity and to work for its progress, and who are united in word and deed to strengthen the values of peace and mutual understanding by working together righteously to promote brotherhood and peaceful coexistence among all peoples of the earth. Distinguished guests, we have all followed with great interest the speeches and discussions of the forum, and we look at its conclusions and recommendations with optimism and great hope as a guide to strengthen the path of fraternity, of the fraternity of humanity, which is in great need as never before, to revive the ways of closeness and understanding among the followers of religions and beliefs as the main approach to achieve concord rather than opposition, unity instead of division. And as we walk together hand in hand to achieve the goal of a prosperous future, we must all unanimously agree under these exceptional conditions to halt the war between Russia and Ukraine and engage in serious negotiations for the good of all humanity.
عنايتنا لتأخذ مسارها الصحيح ضمن مساعينا.
In light of the important results you have achieved, which we strongly support, it only remains for us to affirm that we devote our extreme attention to these results with God's help, that they may take the right direction in our efforts to contribute to the spread of peace and the strengthening of the values of tolerance and coexistence among our countries and their people. And in conclusion, we express our sincere appreciation to the esteemed participants for their efforts worthy of consideration and gratitude in carrying out their noble missions. We also extend our thanks to the organizers of the forum for preparing and organizing it in the best way possible. And we ask the Most High to fill everyone's steps on the path of love and concord.
وبالشكر والامتنان للجهات المنظمة التي أسهمت في الإعداد للملتقى وتنظيمه كما يجب داعين الله عز وجل أن يسدد خطوات
We ask the Most High to fill everyone's steps on the path of love and concord, armed with truth and patience, for the sake of humanity, with success and blessings. May God's peace, mercy, and blessings be with you. The first discourse of this event from His Majesty the King of Bahrain,
Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and Chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders.
And now we'll hear from the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, co-signer of the Document of Human Fraternity.
Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. Jalalat al-Malik Hamad bin Isa al-Khalifa, Malik Mamlakat.
Praise be to God. May God's blessings and peace be upon our Master, Prophet Muhammad, his family, and his companions. Our dear guest, Your Holiness Pope Francis, esteemed clergy and scholars of the Catholic Church, esteemed colleagues and members of the Muslim Council of Elders, may the peace, mercy, and blessings of God be upon you.
وللمشاركة في هذا الملتقى الكبير ملتقى الشرق والغرب من أجل التعايش الإنساني. وإنه لملتقى تاريخي لما يضمه من قامات كبرى.
And he's saying that this is an historic encounter which brings with it the thought of many scholars, politicians, those who work in communication. It's a meeting worthy of being considered in history, which will record the words that have been spoken in this meeting. From here, from Bahrain, from this great country with its traditions, its a tradition of peace and tolerance and coexistence between civilizations and dialogue between them, so that this dialogue will be a source for the good of humanity.
في حاجة إلى أن أكرر على مسامعكم أحاديث الصراع الذي تعيشه الإنسانية اليوم في الشرق والغرب.
I don't think it unworthy to repeat
التي يجنيها إنسان القرن الحادي والعشرين، حروبا ودماء وتدميرا وفقرا، بل ثكلا ويتما وترملا وتشريدا.
We've had a history of destruction and poverty, and in order to hope for the future, the reason for the acts of destruction we've witnessed is because of the lack of justice, guaranteeing justice in society and balance for human beings in body and soul on this earth. Today's society has been transformed into a jungle where there are wars, greed, that is a dangerous market or commerce of arms trade, the arms trade. There's also the propagation of conflicts, of religious conflicts that tend to threaten the stability. Politics on which these conflicts find support and also the theory of several nations, one of which is the conflict between civilizations, and other theories based on superiority that want to establish a new world system. A few days ago, we've heard declarations of someone who has great responsibilities in the West, who says that the world is a jungle. And these are declarations إلى أكثر من 5,000 عام وليس فقط إلى 300 أو 400 عام. That see the East as like a source of threats. There's a lot of fear.
عقول نخبة متميزة من مفكر الغرب وكبار قادته وقد أدرك بعضهم أن السياسة الغربية
even people in the East are afraid of these Western theories.
لما تتسم به من تشنجات تقوم على استعراض
And they don't believe that the politics of the West will be able to resolve the problems that are in the world when they only flex their muscle of war. Rather, they want to propose that culture substitute politics in order to raise up the cultural level and spiritual level of society. But there remains the delusion. We always need to think that there will remain a relationship between the East and the West. And one part cannot be isolated from the other. The West needs the wisdom of the East and to be inspired by the religions there and their vision of man created by God, of the depth of the Eastern vision regarding realities. Also based on the saying, وهو في حاجة إلى المواد الخام المكنوزة في أعماق هاتين القارتين. The world needs many resources that are on the territories of Asia and Africa. والشيء ذاته أو قريب منه يقال على الشرق فهو في حاجة إلى اقتباس علوم الغرب والاستعانة بها في نهضته التقنية والمادية واستيراد المنتجات الصناعية من أسواق الغرب كما يجب على الشرقيين أن ينظروا. And the East needs to be able to use the scientific progress of the West. بحسبانها نتاج ظروف وتطورات وتفاعلات خاصة بهم دفعوا ثمنها غاليا عبر. To look at the values of those in the West, their history and their experience. The wise people in Islam need to explain well their beliefs, especially when speaking about relationship between peoples and reconciliation. And the values that we have in common between the East and the West, Islam needs to be explained within its true meaning needs to be explained. Many Muslims who have gone to the West have become part of the society, of Western society. وأثرت على مساحة لا يستهان بها في رؤاهم وأنظارهم بل في مناهج تعليمهم وطرائق. And there are influences of their presence in society, in scholastic programs as well, and this means that we need to have a different relationship where a serene society where the cultures of people can be conserved far away from the concept of domination. حيث يقول إنه لا يمكن اعتبار الثقافة الغربية وحدها ذات طابع حضاري وأنها المعيار الذي تتحدد به ثقافات الآخرين فأي تدخل في ثقافات الآخرين. The Western culture cannot be used as the basis on which to judge other cultures. You can't establish freedom and equality using force. If we would do this, there's no difference between us and the barbarians. I must highlight what it says in the document of human fraternity, which promotes understanding, mutual respect, and underlines the importance of relationships between the East and the West, and that both need to learn from the experience of the other. And this meeting here in Bahrain, taking place in Bahrain, will help to establish and reconfirm this relationship between East and West. There's also looking at the declaration in Bahrain on human coexistence, a theory, a Western theory. We have an Eastern and Islamic theory that is in contrast with the Western theory that talks about dialogue and encounter. This new theory looks at mutual self-knowledge and collaboration, mutual understanding and collaboration. In order to accomplish what God has given us to do and not to ruin the world that He has given us, this theory is based on knowledge and begins or takes inspiration from the Quran. The first rule also in the Quran says that God created the different races and nations. And he's now citing the Quran that He could have made man as one people only, and yet He wanted differences between peoples and persons. And this difference is a divine law. We need to remember that religion cannot be imposed. And he's asking if you can make someone be faithful. And so the differences between people, their right to their own belief and their religion, are laws. And if we base ourselves on that relationship, then
المؤمنين فقط وإنما خطاب للناس جميعا يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله.
God created man and woman so that they might know each other.
نعم هو الأصل الثالث المستدل منطقيا من الأصلين السابقين ويمكن صياغته في قاعدة تقول العلاقة المشروعة بين الناس في القرآن هي فقط علاقة التعارف والسلام وهكذا تترتب القوانين القرآنية لضبط العلاقات الإنسانية في القرآن الكريم ترتبا منطقيا لا مجال فيه لتأويل أو تحريف. الاختلاف في الطبائع المستلزم لحرية الاعتقاد.
And so the differences of human nature and beliefs are essential for peace between peoples. This Islamic concept is clear because says that Islam is a religion of peace and equality.
فهذا كذب محض على الإسلام وعلى سيرة رسول الإسلام حتى وإن تبنى هذا الافتراء بعض المنتسبين إلى هذا الدين القائم على الحجة والبرهان لا على الريبة والبهتان.
So he says what is said and promoted every now and then about the institution of war in Islam against infidels is untrue and indeed outright lies about Islam and the life of its prophet, even if such are purported by some followers of the same religion, a religion based on proof and evidence, not on ambiguity and lies.
نداء إلى علماء الأديان والمفكرين والإعلاميين بأن يبذلوا مزيداً من الجهد من أجل تربية النشء وتثقيف الشباب على مشتركات الأديان وتحويلها إلى برامج علمية وتربوية.
And he's calling on religious scholars and thinkers to put more effort into the education of youth about such indisputable facts about religious commonalities. They should be adapted into modern academic programs for teaching and convincing young people that there is room in life in the eyes of religious philosophy for those of different faiths, races, color, and languages, and that cultural diversity enriches civilization and establishes the peace that is lacking. I furthermore call on my brothers, Muslim scholars across the world of every doctrine, sect, and school of thought to hold an Islamic dialogue, a dialogue around unity, cohesion, and rapprochement, a dialogue for Islamic fraternity, void of division, discord, and more especially of sectarian strife. There should be a focus on commonalities and meeting points with an understanding of differences. Let us together chase away any talk of hate, provocation, and excommunication and set aside ancient and modern conflict in all its forms and with all its negative offshoots. I address with a loving heart for all this special call to our Shia Muslim brothers. I reiterate that the senior scholars at Al-Azhar and the Muslim Council of Elders and I are ready to host a similar meeting with open hearts and extended hands so we can sit down together around the table to put aside our differences and strengthen our Islamic unity on positions which are known to be pragmatic and serve the goals of Islam and its law, which prohibits Muslims from giving in to calls for division and fragmentation. We must beware of falling into the trap of compromising homeland's stability and exploiting religion to stoke the fires of nationalistic and ideological sentiments, not to mention interference with countries and their sovereignty or stealing their lands. I have every faith that if we have goodwill and determination, we can create a civil model showcasing Islam and Muslims in the rightful way this religion deserves, a religion that requires its followers before others to treat it fairly. On this important occasion for hosting dialogue between East and West for the sake of human coexistence, I lend my voice to all those seeking peace and good. I also call for the end of the Russian-Ukrainian war, to spare the lives of innocents who have no hand in this violent tragedy. I call for hoisting the flag of peace, not of victory, and to sit down for dialogue and negotiation. In fact, I call for an end to all ongoing fighting on earth, or at least for an extended truce, to rebuild bridges of dialogue, understanding, and trust, and to establish peace in a world full of wounds. The alternative is more graver consequences for the people of the East and West alike. Thank you for your attention, and may God's Peace and blessing be upon you all.
of the Vatican.
We've just heard both from the King of Bahrain and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, and we will now hear the words of His Holiness Pope Francis.
أصحاب السمو الملكي، أخي العزيز فضيلة الإمام الأكبر الدكتور أحمد الطيب شيخ الأزهر الشريف، أخي العزيز قداسة البطريرك
We're hearing a translation, I believe.
والمدنية المحترمين، سيداتي سادتي، أحييكم تحية قلبية وأشكركم على حفاوة الاستقبال والعقد منتدى الحوار هذا الذي تم تنظيمه تحت رعاية صاحب الجلالة ملك البحرين. يتخذ هذا البلد اسمه من المياه المحيطة به. في الواقع كلمة البحرين تذكر ببحرين اثنين لنفكر في
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highnesses, your dear brother, Dr. Al-Tayyib, Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, dear brother Bartholomew Ecumenical Patriarch, distinguished religious and civil authorities, ladies and gentlemen. I greet you all most cordially, and I am grateful for your welcome to this forum of dialogue organized under the patronage of His Majesty, the King of Bahrain. This country takes its name from its waters. The name Bahrain means two seas. It makes us think of the waters of the sea, which brings lands and nations into contact and connects distant peoples. In the words of an ancient proverb, what the land divides, the sea unites. The earth seen from heaven appears as a vast blue sea that unites different shores. From the heavens, it seems to remind us that we are indeed one family, not islands, but one great archipelago. This is how the Most High wants us to be, and this country, which is an archipelago of other 30 islands, can well symbolize that desire. Yet we are living at a time when humanity, connected as never before, appears much more divided than united. Here, too, the name Bahrain can help us to reflect. The two seas of which it speaks refers to the fresh waters of its underwater springs and the brackish waters of the Gulf. Nowadays, in a somewhat similar way, we find ourselves overlooking two seas with very different waters, the calm, freshwater sea of a serene life together, and the salty sea of indifference marred by clashes and swept by the winds of war. Its destructive billows growing ever more tumultuous, threatening to overwhelm us all. Tragically, East and West increasingly resemble two opposing seas. But we, on the other hand, are here together because we all intend to set sail on the same waters, choosing the route of encounter rather than that of confrontation. The path of dialogue indicated by the title of this forum, East and West for Human Coexistence. Our Holy Father is now giving his discourse. We have a problem with the audio, and so you are probably hearing the translation in Arabic. And what I am saying is, I believe, what he is saying at this moment. Our Holy Father continued saying, after two terrible world wars, a Cold War that for decades kept the world in suspense, catastrophic conflicts taking place in every part of the globe and in the midst of accusations, threats, and condemnations, we continue to find ourselves on the brink of a delicate precipice, and we do not want to fall. It is a striking paradox that while the majority of the world's population is united in facing the same difficulties, suffering from grave food, ecological, and pandemic crises, as well as an increasingly scandalous global injustice, a few potentates are caught up in a resolute struggle for partisan interests, reviving obsolete rhetoric, redesigning spheres of influence and opposing blocs. We appear to be witnessing a dramatic and childlike scenario. In the Garden of Humanity, instead of cultivating our surroundings, we are playing instead with fire, missiles and bombs, weapons that bring sorrow and death, covering our common home with ashes and hatred. Such will be the bitter consequences if we continue to accentuate conflict instead of understanding. If we persist in stubbornly imposing our own models and despotic, imperialist, nationalist, and populist visions, if we are unconcerned about the culture of others, if we close our eyes to the plea of ordinary people and the voice of the poor, if we continue simplistically to divide people into good and bad, if we make no effort to understand one another and to cooperate for the good of all, these are the choices for which before us, since in a globalized world, we only advance by rowing together. If we sail alone, we go adrift. On the stormy sea of conflicts, let us keep before our eyes the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together, which calls for a fruitful encounter between West and East to help cure their respective maladies. We are here as men and women who believe in God and in our brothers and sisters to reject isolating thinking, the approach to reality that overlooks the great sea of humanity by concentrating only on its narrow currents. We want the divergences between East and West to be settled for the good of all, without distracting attention from another divergence that is constantly and dramatically increasing, the gap between the North and the South of the world. The emergence of conflicts should not cause us to lose sight of the less evident tragedies in our human family, such as the catastrophic inequality, whereby the majority of people on our planet experience unprecedented injustice, the shameful scourge of hunger, and the calamity of climate change, a sign of our lack of care for the common home. When it comes to such issues which we have discussed in these days, religious leaders must surely commit themselves and set a good example. We have a specific role to play, and this forum has offered us a further opportunity in this regard. It is our duty to encourage and assist our human family, interdependent, yet at the same time disconnected, to sail the sea together. I would therefore like to propose 3 challenges that emerge from the document on human fraternity and from the Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration, on both of which we have reflected in these days. These challenges have to do with prayer, education, and action. First of all, prayer, which touches the human heart. Truth to tell, the tragedies we are enduring, the dangerous divisions we are experiencing, and the imbalances under which the modern world labors are linked with a more basic imbalance which is rooted in the heart of man. That is their ultimate cause. Consequently, the greatest risk lies not in specific objects, material realities, or institutions, but in our human inclination to close ourselves in on our own immanence, our own group, our own petty interests. This is not a failing of our age. It has been present from the beginning of humanity, and with God's help, it can be overcome.
فالخطر الأكبر لا يكمن في الأشياء أو في الوقائع المادية أو في المنظمات، بل في ميل الإنسان إلى الانغلاق على جوهر كيانه.
For this reason, prayer, the closing of our hearts to the Most High, is essential for purifying ourselves of selfishness, close-mindedness, self-referentiality, falseness, and injustice. Those who pray receive peace of heart. They cannot fail to bear witness to this and to invite others, above all by their example, not to fall prey to a paganism that reduces human beings to what they sell, buy, or are entertained by, but instead to rediscover the infinite dignity with which each person is endowed. The followers of the religions are men and women of peace, who, as they journey alongside others on this earth, invite them with gentleness and respect to lift their gaze to heaven. They bring to their prayer, like incense that rises to the Most High, the trials and tribulations of all. For this to be the case, however, there is one essential premise, and that is religious freedom. The Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration explains that God instructs us to exercise a divine gift of freedom of choice, and consequently compelled religion cannot bring a person into a meaningful relationship with God. Any form of religious coercion is unworthy of the Almighty, since He has not handed the world over to slaves, but to free creatures whom He fully respects. Let us commit ourselves then to ensuring that the freedom of creatures reflects the sovereign freedom of the Creator, that places of worship are always and everywhere protected and respected, and that prayer is favored and never hindered. It is not enough to grant permits and recognize freedom of worship. It is necessary to achieve true freedom of religion.
Ogni costrizione, cioè, è indegna dell'Onnipotente, in quanto Egli non ha consentito il mondo a degli schiavi, ma a delle...
Any form of religious coercion is unworthy of the Almighty, since He has not handed the world over to slaves, but to free creatures whom He fully respects. Any form of religious coercion is... Let us commit ourselves then to ensuring that the freedom of creatures reflects the sovereign freedom of the Creator, that places of worship are always and everywhere protected and respected, and that prayer is favored and never hindered. It is not enough to grant permits and recognize freedom of worship. It is necessary to achieve true freedom of religion. Not only every society, but also every creed is called to self-examination in this regard. It is called to question whether it coerces God's creatures from without or liberates them from within, whether it helps people to reject rigidity, narrow-mindedness, and violence, whether it helps believers to grow in authentic freedom, which is not doing what we want, but directing ourselves to the good for which we were created.
Se la sfida dell'orazione riguarda il cuore, la seconda sfida, l'educazione, concerne essenzialmente la mente dell'uomo.
If the challenge of prayer regards the heart, the second challenge, that of education, essentially concerns the mind. The Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration states that ignorance is the enemy of peace. It is true, for where opportunities for education are lacking, extremism increases and forms of fundamentalism take root. Yet, if ignorance is the enemy of peace, education is the friend of development, provided that it is an education truly befitting men and women as dynamic and relational beings. An education that is not rigid and monolithic, but open to challenges and sensitive to cultural changes, not self-referential and isolating, but attentive to the history and culture of others, not stagnant, but inquisitive and open to embracing different and essential aspects of the one human family to which we belong. In that way, it can enter into the heart of problems without claiming to have easy answers to resolve complex issues, but willing instead to embrace a crisis without seeing it in terms of conflict. For it is unworthy of the human mind to think that power should prevail over reason, to bring the methods of the past to present-day issues.
Mente umana credere che le ragioni della forza prevalgano sulla forza delle ragioni, utilizzare metodi del passato per le questioni presenti, applicare gli...
It is unworthy of the human mind to think that power should prevail over reason, to bring the methods of the past to present-day issues, to apply models based on technology or mere convenience to the history and culture of human beings. This means that we must raise questions, allow ourselves to be challenged, learn to enter into dialogue patiently, respectfully, and with a willingness to listen, to learn the history and culture of others. That is how to educate human minds, by encouraging mutual understanding. For it is not enough to say we are tolerant. We really have to make room for others, granting them rights and opportunities. This is an approach that begins with education, and it is one that the religions are called to support. Concretely, I would emphasize 3 urgent educational priorities. First, the recognition of women in the public sphere, namely, their right to education, to employment, and their freedom to exercise their social and political rights. This is in the document on human fraternity. In this, as in other areas, education is the path to liberation from historical and social legacies opposed to the spirit of fraternal solidarity that ought to mark those who worship God and love their neighbor. Second, the protection of the fundamental rights of children, also a quote from the document on human fraternity, so that they can grow up receiving schooling, be helped and supported, so as not to live in the grip of hunger and violence. Let us teach others and learn ourselves how to view crises, problems, and wars through the eyes of children. This is not a mark of naivete, but of far-sighted wisdom, because only if we are concerned for them will progress be reflected in innocence rather than profit, and will lead to the building of a better and more humane future. Education begins in the heart of the family and continues within a community, village, or city. And so I'd like to highlight the third aspect, the education for citizenship, for living in community and respect for one another and for the law. Then, to the particular importance of the concept of citizenship, which is based on the equality of rights and duties. Here, commitment is demanded so that we can establish in our societies the concept of full citizenship and reject the discriminatory use of the word minorities, which engenders seeds of isolation and inferiority. Its misuse paves the way for hostility and discord. It undoes any successes and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against. And again, he's quoting from the document on human fraternity. And so we come to the last of our 3 challenges, that which concerns action. We might say our human abilities. The Kingdom of Bahrain Declaration states that whenever hatred, violence, and discord are preached, God's name is desecrated. All who are religious reject these things as utterly unjustifiable. They forcefully reject the blasphemy of war and the use of violence, and they consistently put this rejection into practice. For it is not enough to proclaim that a religion is peaceful. We need to condemn and isolate the perpetrators of violence who abuse its name. Nor is it enough to distance ourselves from intolerance and extremism. We need to counter them. This is why it is so necessary to stop supporting terrorist movements fueled by financing, the provision of weapons and strategy, and by attempts to justify these movements, even using the media. All these must be regarded as international crimes that threaten security and world peace. Such terrorism must be condemned in all its forms and expressions, as well as ideological terrorism. Religious men and women, as people of peace, are likewise opposed to the race to rearmament, to the commerce of war, to the arms trade, to the market of death. They do not support alliances against some, but means of encounter with all. Without yielding to forms of relativism or syncretism of any sort, they pursue a single path, which is that of fraternity, dialogue, and peace. These are the things they support. Dear friends, let us pursue this path. Let us open our hearts to our brothers and sisters. Let us press forward on the journey towards greater knowledge and understanding of one another. Let us strengthen the bonds between us without duplicity or fear, in the name of the Creator, who has put us together in this world as guardians of our brothers and sisters. And if different potentates deal with each other on the basis of interests, money, and power plays, may we show that another path of encounter is possible. possible and necessary, since force, arms, and money will never paint a future of peace. So let us encounter one another for the sake of humanity, and in the name of the one who loves humanity, the one whose name is peace. Let us promote concrete initiatives to ensure that the journey of the great religions will be ever more effective and continuous, a conscience of peace for our world. And I now once again give my appeal for peace in Ukraine and that peace might be negotiated. The Creator invites us to act, especially on behalf of all those many creatures of His who do not yet find a sufficient place on the agenda of the powerful, the poor, the unborn, the elderly, the infirm, migrants. If we who believe in the God of mercy do not give a hearing to the poor and those in need of mercy, and a voice to the voiceless, who will do it? Let us take their side. Let us make every effort to assist a humanity wounded and sorely tried. By doing so, we will draw upon our world the blessing of the Most High. May He enlighten our journey and join our hearts, our minds, and our strength, so that our worship of God may be matched by a concrete and fraternal love of our neighbor, so that together we may be prophets of community, artisans of unity, and builders of peace. Thank you. Words of Pope Francis here at the conclusion of the Bahrain Forum of Dialogue taking place here at Al-Fida Square.
King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of the Kingdom of Bahrain, Your Holiness Pope Francis of the Vatican, Your Eminence Dr. Ahmed Al-Tayyib, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and Chairman of the Muslim Council of Elders, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you very much for joining us today. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
And here we see many of the people who've been participating in this forum taking place here. About delegations from about 60 countries, including the United Arab Emirates, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Niger, Turkey, Lebanon, Russia, India, Tunisia, Senegal, Costa Rica, Switzerland, Argentina, Iraq, Egypt, the UK, Algeria, Pakistan, Indonesia, Morocco, Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Syria, Sudan, Palestine, Guinea, Oman, Malaysia, South Korea, Italy, Chechnya, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kosovo, Uganda, Albania, Chad, Singapore, Mozambique, Tatarstan, Austria, Kazakhstan, Bulgaria, Kenya, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Mauritania, Japan, Romania, the Ivory Coast, Germany, Canada, France, Spain, Jordan, Belarus, Tanzania, Kuwait, and Bahrain, the host country. We now see some of the entourage from Rome, Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, who is the pro-prefect of the Dicastery for Evangelization. The King of Bahrain also took place in the inauguration of the Cathedral of Our Lady of Arabia on the 9th of December, just a day after the Roman Church celebrates the feast of Our Lady's Immaculate Conception. Cardinal Tagle, who consecrated the cathedral, also met with the King of Bahrain at that time. And Bishop Hinder, the apostolic administrator of the region of Northern Arabia, said that it was a very cordial meeting that took place between Cardinal Tagley and His Majesty, whom we see here right now, walking alongside Pope Francis, who's flanked by his interpreter, as well as the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, the three of whom we've heard speak today. And later on today, you'll be able to see images of this newly inaugurated cathedral. This is the first full day of our Holy Father's 39th apostolic journey here to the Kingdom of Bahrain. As soon as this particular event is over, he will be headed to the papal residence. It's just past 11 a.m. here, local time in Bahrain. Our Holy Father will, after this, go to the papal residence and he will dine in private. He will later be meeting privately with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Muhammad Al-Tayyib, whom we heard speaking. Our Holy Father and His Excellency worked very closely together on the document on human fraternity, which both signed in the United Arab Emirates in February of 2019. It is said that they have a very friendly relationship and a deep esteem and respect for each other. The Grand Imam on the left of our screens, flanking His Holiness. Later today, our Holy Father will be meeting with the Muslim Council of Elders, also here on the grounds of the palace, in the mosque here on the grounds. And he will also take part in an ecumenical prayer meeting. The Grand Imam of Al-Azhar is a prestigious and very prominent official title in Egypt, and he is recognized by some members of the Islamic community to be the highest authority in Sunni Islamic thought and Islamic jurisprudence. And the person who holds this position holds great influence on followers of various theological traditions, the Ash'ari and Maturidi traditions. And with these images, we now bring to an end this live broadcast of the closing of the Forum for Dialogue, East and West for Human Coexistence, taking place at this square we see here before us, Al-Fida, on the grounds of Sakir Royal Palace in Bahrain. I invite you to join us again. It'll be 4:30 p.m. local time here in Bahrain when the Pope will meet with members of the Muslim Council of Elders in the mosque, also here on the grounds of Sakir Royal Palace. You can find coverage of all papal events, as well as coverage of Vatican and world news on our Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter accounts. On behalf of Vatican Media, I'd like to thank our audio technician, Mario Scatone, and our coordinator, Father Johan Pacheco, and all others who've made this broadcast possible, especially our media partners, Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network at Madarshan TV, Shalom World Television Networks USA, EWTN, Sultan Light Media, Shalom TV India, Sunday Shalom, and Luminous Radio. As we carry these images with us now, we remember to pray for our Holy Father and for all the dignitaries he'll be meeting with, all of the people who've attended this event, that we might all become bearers of God's peace and love, so that we might all worship Him in love. Laudetur Jesus Christus. Praised be Jesus Christ.